This is Paul Schneiderman today on the 160th edition of the Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio. My special guest again for the third time is the prominent Seattle Mariners insider for, I think it's 7:10 a.m. Seattle Sports. Hope I have the right name of the entity. Shannon Drayer. Shannon has covered the Mariners in pregame and postgame shows now for many years. She also hosts a podcast as well as the Hot Stove and Cactus League reports. Hopefully I have that down right. We're gonna have another fun chat today. I'll get back to Shannon in a minute. I want to introduce Olivia. Olivia Coyne has been working with me now for a couple of years. Olivia's dad's a good friend of mine, and Olivia is a big sports fan. She's a University of Washington graduate, just finished her first semester at Seattle Law School, and Olivia's still helping on the podcast when she can and helps do some law firm stuff. It's great to have her continue to help out. And Olivia's a huge baseball fan, a big fan of Shannon. So Olivia's going to be kind of the main interviewer today. I'll ask a few questions. So this will be a lot of fun. My podcast is now on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Google, iTunes, Podbean. You go to sportsuntoldpodcast.net. You can listen to my shows in those set outlets. You can also just go to my law office website, plslawoffices.com, or you can also just Google Sports Untold YouTube. Well, anyhow, Shannon's back for the third time. I think I had you on in late 2019. You also came on in late 21. Remember the first time went to the Rainier Avenue Radio old studios, and we're more in a virtual age now, but today we're on Zoom. Still keep the affiliation with Rainier Avenue Radio. It's just a more of a virtual era now. Um, I don't want to ask Shannon the exact same kind of questions I asked her in the first two interviews, but from several years ago, but there might be a little overlap. But Shannon, thanks for coming back. Really appreciate it on the 160th edition of the Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio.
I'm really happy to be here. Thanks, Paul.
Absolutely, Shannon. Okay, here's my first question, and this is a question I asked your colleague Ian Furness this question yesterday. I've asked a whole bunch of guests this question. Now, I got this question because about in late 24, I had on Chris Cillizza, formerly of CNN, formerly the Washington Post. He wrote this book about the presidents in sports. So we can blame Chris Cillizza in terms of where I got this question from. So I think you were born during the LBJ or Nixon years, right?
Yes, I think
Okay.
so.
Okay. So if you could have a sports only conversation
Oh
with
boy.
a president in your lifetime, not necessarily your favorite president, but a president you'd love to have a sports only interview or conversation with, who would it be?
A president?
Yes, just
Oh,
sports only with the president.
I don't think I've even considered that.
Do you want a couple clues or hints
Um,
on the sports ties with some of the presidents? Would that help?
you know what? I think that this is one I have not really ever studied. I
Okay.
every anecdotally hear every now and then that a certain president was into sports or into baseball, but I don't think I have kind of the knowledge on that to really give what would be an answer that would really be very valid for
Well,
that
Bush
point, rather than
41
just trying
play
to
was a
pull
Yale.
something out
Well, I'll
of
give you
the
a couple
air.
of clues. I'll give you a couple of clues. Bush
Okay.
41 was a Yale baseball player, and I
Yeah.
think he may have played with Babe Ruth, had some encounter with Babe Ruth at one time. Bush 43 was a owner of the Texas Rangers. Obama was a big basketball fan. Nixon was a big baseball and football fan. I don't know, I'm just giving you. Ford was a college football player.
Hmm.
Trump owned a USFL franchise. There's some other sports ties, other presidents. I throw out one.
I, I mean, about the only thing that I can say that I can talk to that I have heard from people personally
Yeah.
about um, is Bush, who owned part of the Rangers at one point. And I think one of the stories that I love hearing is when they were in the old ballpark in Arlington, across from the new one that they went into in 2020. They had, and it's this way all over baseball, just the most delightful elevator attendants. And I sometimes just kind of check out what the elevator is like, what the conditions are of the elevator. Does this player have or does this elevator operator perhaps have a stool to sit on in between? Can they open up the door at some point and see the game or the stadium, or are they stuck in this elevator the entire time? And the press box elevator operator was in a press box that also went up to the suites and really had no view when the door opened other than an outside facing concourse. And it really was not one of the more luxurious elevators over in the old building there. And one year I come back and he's got a TV in there. And he is so excited that he actually gets to watch the game, that he is in an elevator for the whole time. And he very proudly told me that George Bush got that TV for him so he could watch the game. And
So Bush 43, if you had to pick one, maybe.
yes, yeah, I
Okay.
thought that that was very, very sweet.
Ian Fredesque thought that question was okay, but some of my friends are kidding me about that question. Anyway, I know it's a little out of the box. Okay.
Yeah, I hadn't thought
Olivia,
of that before. So
it's all good.
yes, different.
Olivia, jump in. Get a couple questions in for Shannon.
So I think the last interview, Paul asked something similar to what I'm going to ask, but maybe this will bring another answer. What was your welcome to the big leagues moment?
Ooh, man, that was so long ago. That is a tough one right there. I think honestly, it was the first time I got to go on a big league field. I mean, that's when it all became very real for me. And, you know, I was light years away from where I am now of what I was doing and what I know now. But the very fact that I got to walk on a baseball field, and at that time it was turf because it was the Kingdom. It was not the most majestic palace to get to walk into the first time, but to be down on the actual field and the reality that not many people get to do this, and the reality of, you know, I'm steps away from where Ken Griffey Jr., you know, stood in the batter's box or patrolled center field was profound for me. And so for me, that was, you know, it was a small step at the time. I was not doing much more than running tape or holding a microphone in interviews, but I was there. You know, I had access. I was there. It was the first foot in the door. I think I appreciate it as the first big league moment for me.
Okay, I like that. That's a good one. And then sort of in that realm, do you have any tips for working in sports as a woman or getting your start, specifically from that perspective?
I think um, the thing that I love about the job that I do and I have done, and I think it really applies, you know, to the written press as well. I do think that this is a field in covering sports that you can work your way up in, that you can start at the bottom and you can learn things on the job. And, you know, I don't have a journalism degree. I had very little writing experience. My background was psychology and drama when I came in, but everything that I've learned in terms of being a reporter or being a host or anything that I've done, I've learned on the job. And I went through all the steps of being a broadcaster, of being a radio person. There are times when I get a little bit envious of those that start out in the minor leagues in broadcasting, because then you learn a minor league operation and in turn a baseball operation from the inside out. And I didn't get that. You know, the first teams that I covered were professional teams. But in terms of learning to report and learning to broadcast and along those lines, I did start from the absolute bottom, you know, doing a 4-hour shift a week for a long time before I was allowed to do things. So I think that this goes for anyone and not just for women. If you are interested in this field, it's, you know, the rewards are going to be different for most. It's not a field that you're going to enter and make a ton of money. It's not a field that you're going to enter where you can have weekends and events and things like that off. You know, you are working at very popular times to do other things. But it is, I truly believe, a field where you can prove yourself and you can move up. I do think that there's a lot less politics that go into this. If you can write, if you can speak, if you can get the story, if you can get the access, if you can get the relationships, you can move up and you can move towards whatever your ultimate goal is in this profession. And sometimes it's hard to do that in different places. So that's something that I appreciate about it, as a person, not just as a woman. And I think that, as a woman, I think that I tend to not think of myself in that regard. I tend to think of myself as a reporter or as a host. I try not to let that kind of set my path. Although I don't think that you should ever discount that. And Mike Hargrove, former manager of the Mariners, is someone who helped instill that in me a little bit, and not to apologize for being a woman or think that that is any different. He said that it will always give you a different perspective, and a perspective that others aren't going to have. It's not the only perspective you have to, you have, but don't throw it out. Use that. If you see things differently, that's a good thing. And there's value in that. So I try to, put it out of my mind without closing doors to the view that it can give me.
Going off of what you mentioned about how it's such a unique job in the times you work and all of that stuff, how do you maintain your relationships with friends and family while traveling so much? Because I could not imagine.
You mean sanity? um, it's hard. I think that, you come to these jobs from different places, and you're in a different place when you enter these jobs. And I entered this job in a position where I was able to give almost all of my focus to it. And so I think that if you enter the job where you do have, say you have a family or something like that, you learn, you come to it with the experience of having that kind of balance before. I think it's harder when those things come to you as you are on the job. Personally, for me, I understand, I don't get mad if, no, I can't have so and so's birthday off or something like that, and the understanding of how that is going to work. But um, I do prioritize the time that I'm away from the game. And I kind of joke that when I get to the off season is all about friends and family. And the family is always there. I have to check in with the friends that I still have after ignoring them for 8 months, basically. You do what you can where you can in establishing and keeping those relationships going, but you're just not going to have that quality time unless there's somebody who are in the business and that you see along the way as well. So it's not easy. It is something that you have to prioritize where you can prioritize it. And sometimes that competes with things like sleep and rest and well-being. So it's a balance that, you have to, I think, kind of set some boundaries in what you can and what you can't do on both sides of the fence.
Sounds like I'll have to wait to get a dog for a while if I want to go into sports.
Well, I mean, I think the dog is a good idea. There are dog walking and pet walking, and if you have family around, you can make that work. But I mean, I gave up on plants a long time ago. And that's partly I'm a terrible green thumb, but you're not going to be able to take care of a plant, let alone some other things, if you are on your own. If you have a family, that can be different. Yeah, I remember that a couple of years into traveling, um, I think it was around late July, maybe early August, my refrigerator broke. And all I did was unplug it and clean it out because there was not going to be time to get it fixed until the end of the season. It's like, how many meals am I eating at home anyway? It's not a big deal. Just make sure that the
Well,
next time I open it up, there's not a horror show in
Yeah.
there. We'll get to that first thing once the season ends. I mean, that's how crazy it can get. But, that's what I signed up for.
let me get a question, Olivia. You come back with some more questions. So I asked Ian Furness this question yesterday. A second, maybe somewhat out of the box question for you, Shannon, but that's the fun thing with interviewing. Um, how would you feel if the Mariners were to name the stadium or maybe a wing of the stadium after the late U.S. Senator Slade Gordon, who saved baseball in Seattle a couple times? Would you like to see the former senator's name incorporated somehow or another into the stadium?
That's another thing I haven't thought about. a lot. It's interesting. One of the first things I do at the end of the season is I take a trip to my dad's. I go spend time with him. And what's the number one thing we do? Well, it's watch sports. And there was no sports on one day. And I went back and I watched the Sonic Skate film. I hadn't seen that in a long time. He hadn't seen it. And I thought this will be something that's interesting to see. And, it's not something this many years, uh, separated that you think about. But yeah, there are certain key figures that were very instrumental in the sports franchises. And I kind of think that that is something that is probably going to be a little bit more forgotten now that you have the established stadiums and you're not seeing as much movement with it. But, that's something I would leave up to, those who know more about the ins and the outs of it. It was a momentous push to save this franchise and to keep this franchise here. And I don't want to answer that in fear of, again, I don't know enough about it. I wouldn't want to be shorting, is there anybody else who deserves
Sure.
something as well? But the champions of keeping the team in Seattle, they got the job done. And I don't know how difficult it was or how that all played out exactly at that time. I was just kind of a fan, just going nuts back then and just hoping that was going to work out. Um, but yeah, no, that's interesting. I don't I think if that was something that should have been done, I think it would have been done by now. So I'm really not quite clear on, just what they could do there.
Gordon, as Attorney General, sued the American League, and that resulted in a settlement that brought the Mariners to Seattle. And then in the early 90s, he intervened to help keep the team and getting the Nintendo ownership group. Mid 90s, he intervened again. So he definitely had a history in supporting professional baseball in Seattle.
Yeah, that's much appreciated because
Yeah,
if not, I probably wouldn't be here right now. Be chasing a baseball team somewhere else.
that's it. Olivia, go ahead.
Throughout your time with the Mariners, what has been your favorite moment? And I mean, it could be a very different answer for you as a fan versus as a journalist.
There are too many to even count.
That's good. I'm
Yeah, no,
glad.
there are lots of favorite moments. I mean, there are favorite moments early where players helped me in doing what I was doing and kind of giving me the confidence to do what I was doing. Um, I think kind of a watershed moment there was the year that Edgar Martinez retired. I was doing the pregame interviews for the radio side at the time, and I knew I was going to get him, right before one of his final games. And to me, it was really important to get that interview right. And I spent a lot of time researching and writing notes and writing questions down and things like that. And I wasn't nearly as experienced with interviews as I am now. Um, and it was a big deal for me, and I was taking it very seriously. And we ended up having to do the interview in Minnesota, I believe. And at the time, the day that we selected a time to do it. It was, I think, going to be after batting practice. And so I was kind of hyped up about it, and I was trying to, calm myself. And the whole day was just going to run, just everything was going to lead up to this interview that I just built up to be way more than it was at the time. But it was important to me. It was important, I thought, in Edgar having a fantastic final interview on radio. And so I was in the clubhouse pregame, and all of a sudden he comes up to me and taps me on the shoulder and said, "Why don't we do it right now?" And I was like, "We can't do it right now. We're doing it after batting practice," because that is everything that I had planned on doing. And he said, "No, I think we should do it right now." I'm like, "Edgar, I don't have my notes with me down here." And he looked at me and he said, "You don't need notes." He said, "You're a good reporter." And then he said, "You can do it." And it was a huge moment in that, he said nice things about me, but in that moment, I got a glimpse at what it was like to be one of his teammates. And I had heard stories before that he would talk to hitters and teammates, and anybody could approach him about asking questions about hitting. And one of the big things that he did was instill confidence. And in that moment, he instilled confidence in me in what I did. And it was just the smallest glimpse, the smallest moment inside, the smallest experience that I had that I felt I could identify with some of the players on that team at that time. And, and I thought to myself, well, by darn it, if Edgar Martinez thinks I can do it, I can do this. And it was just a neat, neat moment. And then I would say, other favorite moments. One that was really cool was, I was in the clubhouse when they popped the champagne bottles for the first time in 22. To hear Scott Service address the team and be there before, this year they let in a good amount of the media members when they had that moment, but in 22 they didn't. And that was another kind of inside moment, and just, the thrill for them to see the reactions, to feel kind of the environment and to be there for that. And also the anticipation of what could come next was pretty thrilling. Anytime I talked to Ichiro, anytime I had a one-on-one with Ichiro, or anytime I could just talk to him at his locker, be it with the Mariners or when he was with another team, also way up there in top experiences. And of course, that trip to Japan, his final game in Japan. I'm not sure I'll ever be in an environment like that again. They're all way up there.
Oh, that's incredible. That's so fun to hear as a fan. It kind of goes into my other question of a most memorable celebration. It sounds like you do have one, but does last year come anything close to that? Or was it kind of a weirder environment because of the disappointment of not making it?
It was a weirder environment because of the expectations.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about from the outside. I'm talking about from the inside, from the players themselves. And I think it's easy to sit there and say, hey, and I guess it's easier for me because I'm around them all the time, and I don't have a fan's mentality. I try to look at things more pragmatically. And I know there's only going to be one team, at the end, or two teams that make it to the World Series. And I also take into consideration how hard that is. So to be around them when they are absolutely, and this is, I think, how you want them, it's World Series or bust. We're not in this thing to just be AL West champions. We're not in this just to win a pennant. We are in this probably not just to go to the World Series, but to win it. It was a very different atmosphere because of that. And it was organic, which I think was so important for what they were doing. It was eye-opening in that you have seen, you saw them set about tearing down the team, 6, 7, 8 years ago and build up. And now they're on the doorstep of what they wanted to do. And you've seen every step along the way. And you've seen the development of the pitchers, where they're no longer just young pitchers. These guys are guys that are going out there shouldering, tremendous loads and expecting to be where they're at and go further. And of course, the development of Cal Raleigh, who honestly was a leader just about from the time he set foot, on a major league field. But to see him take it to different levels, it was very different. It was very intense. And, you were thrilled for them in their victories. And then I think probably a little bit more nervous for them in the other parts because the expectations were so high.
Interesting. Paul, do you have one? Or should I
Yeah,
keep
actually, I got a
going?
follow up here.
Brilliant.
This kind of dovetails to Olivia's question, your response. Here's a hypothetical. If the Mariners in the 2026 season were to get back to the American League Championship Series and not make the World Series for the first time, would 26 be a disappointing season?
Okay, here's the thing. So
Okay.
it's a little bit of two sides of a sword here, because if we
Okay.
make the postseason, anything can happen. I think I am comfortable, and I've said this for a few years now, playoffs are a fair expectation. I've said this the last 3 years heading into the season. I think it is fair to set playoffs as an expectation. I think it is fair to set winning a division title as an expectation. Getting to or winning a World Series as an expectation, I think, is a little bit harder for me because they haven't done it yet. Had they done it, then I think you can say that, or I can say that. You can say whatever you want, whatever whatever your expectation for a team is. I think it would be very disappointing if they were a one and done in the postseason. I think if they are to reach the American League Championship Series again, you always want them to take the next step. So I think that that is fair to be disappointed if they don't, but to set that as an expectation because it is the top of the top and they haven't done that before, I'm going to stop just shy of that.
That's part of the thing, though, with Seattle fans. We've never made the World Series in our 50 years of existence. So I think that's part of it. Why people are so have that high expectation right now. But your points are valid. So
It's a very hard thing to do, you know,
yeah.
30 individual, 26-man roster, 162 games. I think the most important thing is you get in and you give yourself a chance. But I do think that, they should be ahead of the eight ball this year because of what they did last year, both heading into the season and then again heading into the postseason. They've seen everything but a World Series now. And as I was talking, the environment was very different from 22 to this year. And now they've seen it. And I don't think they were overwhelmed by any of the moments. I don't think any of it was a surprise. But there's got to be a little something extra that they got as far as they did. And they're basically coming back pretty unchanged, otherwise, than needing a little bit more in the lineup right now.
Go ahead, Olivia. Yes.
I do have some questions about that, but I think I'll do that part later. Um, is there anyone that you've interacted with more specifically around baseball in the Mariners that may not have been presented very favorably in the media, but is actually a really, really great person?
Um, ooh, I'm sure there have been a lot. I This is a while ago, but Jose Guillen, he came to the club with a reputation coming out of Anaheim, and there were some problems there. Was an absolute sweetheart of a person and very thoughtful. Getting him into a clubhouse and seeing how he treated everybody around him, not just teammates, but clubbies, club officials, things like that, and really caring and going the extra mile off the field as well. He did a lot of things quietly that people didn't know about. I think that he was, definitely, um, what I saw, just somebody that probably was underappreciated for the person that he was, in part because he didn't always show that publicly, and sometimes players prefer to be that way, but not at all what I expected. He was much better than the advanced press on him. He's a person that would come to mind right away. More recently, I'm a big Jared Kelnick fan. He is a young player who every now and then would step in it, but he's got a huge heart. He wants to be a part of a team that's so important to him. Like, being a teammate is something that's important to him. And I think sometimes, he would say the wrong thing, or he obviously didn't produce the way that people wanted to, but a lot of his problems, I think, have been just from trying too hard, that things mean too much to him. And when you're 19 or 20 in this game, sometimes those are the hardest things to control. And I think there is somebody who very much cares, and I quietly root for him. I would like to see him do good things in this game.
That's nice to hear. I always really liked him too. I think just a similar age and kind of hard to imagine being in his position. So it's really nice to hear that about him. I always kind of root for him too, except for when we have to deal with it. But, do you have any good Dave Niehaus stories?
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean the most famous one, and it's real. You remember the stories about him liking the white shoes, and he bought most of his shoes, as did the broadcast crew, and that was such a fun broadcast crew. Kevin Kremen, the producer and engineer, had been there, forever with them. Rick Riz was there. Ron Fairley, who has such a unique history in this game. Talking to Ron Fairley, you're one step separated from Mickey Mantle. That was a teammate. I believe it was a roommate at one point. His stories were absolutely unbelievable, and his history in the game, and just a true gentleman. Had a huge appreciation for him. But back in those days, he had certain things that he did, and one of their rituals was to buy shoes at a place called Bob Jones Shoes in Kansas City. And it was kind of a, I think you call it a warehouse shoe store in this day and age, but they had everything that you could ever want. And you would see these guys get on the plane with boxes and boxes. You're not buying one or two, you're buying 6 or 7 pairs of shoes. And Dave Niehaus bought so many of his shoes there, and he, a lot of them were white, and it kind of became part of his lore. And one day we were in Kansas City, and we were doing a big group lunch, which is something that we did a lot more of back then in the day. And we were going to Stroud's Fried Chicken place in Kansas City, which is fantastic. They do a big fried chicken spread family style at Stroud's. And so there was a huge group of us. It was, the radio side, the TV side, the producers, the tech people, the camera people. I think there were some PR people that were at that table. It was a huge, huge table of people, on an afternoon. And back then, we didn't have to be to the ballpark as early as we do now. So it's just a, group really enjoying a huge fried chicken, mashed potatoes, the whole, cinnamon rolls, the whole thing there. And at the end of the lunch, and I'm pretty sure he picked up the tab. I think he usually did. He went around the table. He's like, Bob Jones shoes, Bob Jones shoes. He's asking everybody, we're going to Bob Jones. Anybody going to Bob Jones shoes? Goes all the way around the table, and nobody has said yes. And I'm thinking to myself, well, somebody has to go to Bob Jones shoes with him. I'm like, sure, I guess, yes. So after the lunch, we got into his rental car, and Kevin Kremen pulled me aside and said, put on your seatbelt. And yes, he drove like a bat out of where through the streets of Kansas City to get to his favorite shoe store. And he's like, your stuff is over there. He pointed to one end, and he took off for his end. And the whole ride over, he's telling stories, and it's just fantastic. He lets me off. I go to the women's section. He goes and gets all of his, and he comes up to the front, and he's got like 8 boxes of shoes. And he's like, well, what's the damage with you? And I said, you know what? Honestly, I really didn't find anything. And he was so disappointed. Like, he was all excited, and he wanted me to get shoes too. And truth be told, I have very small feet. It's not easy to find shoes. And so I went back, and I'm like, I think I have to find shoes. I think it will make his day if I come out of here with shoes. So I went and found the shoes. And he brightened up on that, and he thought that was awesome. And then it was back to the hotel and stories the entire way. It was just neat to be able to do that in a place that they loved going to Kansas City. And it was just a happy, happy Dave Niehaus day. But I would say the other, my favorite was he was always the first one to get into the booth every day. And he would have a scorebook out, and he would usually be reading his newspaper. I would usually be the second or third person to come in. And if I was the second person to come in, it was just such a neat privilege to be in the room with him alone. And he would always take time to stop and ask what I had been up to. He was very curious. He wanted to know what was going on and what people were doing, and those conversations and that interest. I mean, it could have been very easily I was just the girl in the booth when they were told you're going to have a reporter traveling with you, and she's a woman. No woman had traveled with them before. And for a long time, I was the only one on the plane who was, not involved with the flight crew. But he welcomed me in with open arms and treated me like a colleague from the get-go, which was just mind-blowing. And I will say, you go back to the woman question, but if you're going to do something like this, it doesn't hurt to have a champion for you, somebody that is, going to, help you along without overtly helping you along. Somebody that that you have the support of. That is something I think for anybody, any young person in this job, it can be intimidating. A lot of these people have been doing it for a long time. But if you have somebody like that, it makes the transition into an absolutely insane job, lifestyle, and all of the above, work environment. It makes it a lot easier.
That's really special. That's really, really cool. Is Kansas City one of your favorite places to travel to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am just sick that they are probably going to build a new ballpark there. I love the ballpark. It's a little bit out of the way. I love the complex of the football of Arrowhead right across the way. And it's I kind of laugh because you look at it, you're like, yep, this is how baseball was played in the 70s. You look around and you kind of get the feel, even though they've done a lot of renovations to it. And I even had an appreciation for Oakland. It's some of the, new palaces, it all starts to feel a little bit of the same sometimes, that you do start to appreciate some other ballparks like that. I like the open outfield. I like an open outfield wherever you can get one. So I like that. I'm from the Midwest and it feels very Midwest there in the summer. So, you get kind of the sense memories about the game there too, but also the city. Another place that they always took us was to the Negro Leagues Museum. And
I've been there.
it's amazing. I go there every chance that I have. I was there again, did some videos there. This year, I encourage people to go to it when they are there. It is well worth it. Talked to Bob Kendrick, who's the president of it, quite a few times. He's very generous with his time and tells wonderful stories. I did have the chance to interview Buck O'Neill my very first year on the job, and that, just opened my eyes and gave me an appreciation, in my first year, that I still go back every year and I try and bring somebody with me because it's a special, special place.
Kansas City was my dad and I are trying to see all of the ballparks, and we've caught the Mariners there a few times. I think 2 or 3 years ago we went to Kansas City, and I don't know if you heard us, but we always yell for you when we're there.
Oh,
But we went to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and it really is incredible. And the city's wonderful. People are so kind and happy you're there. It's kind of magical. It's like pure baseball magic.
it
One more
is.
thing, Kansas City, I want to throw out. The World War One museum there is really neat. The other thing,
Yep.
there's a great art museum, the Nelson Atkins Art Museum. It's an incredible art
Unbelievable
museum
art
in
museum.
Mid-America. What's that?
Yeah, unbelievable art
Unbelievable.
museum.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
There's some historical walks that you can do too.
Hmm.
I believe it's like for the furthest point west of the Civil War. Guys, there's some marker that is there. Good restaurant scene, obviously the barbecue. Highly recommend doing that. But it's one of those ones when they ask, what are some parks that people wouldn't think to go to or put high on their list, and that is definitely one of them.
I'm very disappointed that they're likely building a new park because that one is my favorite. I also really liked Oakland as well. It just has that homey feel. It was it was kind of crap, but it was their crap that they
That's
loved. And
absolutely what it was, and that was the attitude there.
it's
And
so special.
it is. They have a wonderful sound system there, great people that worked there. The last time we were there, I just went hog wild and did everything in that park that I would never, ever be able to do. And it's like, okay, I'm going out to the bullpen. I've never been out to the bullpen before. Who's going to stop me? So out to the bullpen I go. And then for years and years, the batting cages in Oakland are in dead center field underneath the stands there. And every year I would sit in the dugout there waiting for my interview to come, and I'd see people go in there and come out. I had no idea what was in there. We're talking 23 years. Where are they going? So on the last day, and this is hilarious, this was a near disaster. The last day I said, I'm going out there. And so I went downstairs, and one of the Mariners PR people said that they would go out there with me. And then lo and behold, the rest of the reporters were there. Divish was there. I think Kramer was there. We were all there. And we walked around the stadium and went in there, saw the batting cages. Oh my gosh, I almost wish we didn't. That is not, that is definitely kind of the dregs of that stadium, and that's saying something. And there was an elevator there to go up into those stands that are directly across from the press box on top of the stadium. And we took the elevator up and we climbed up, and the seats there were still tarped, but you could walk in the aisles. And we went to the top of the stadium behind center field. And you got up there and you saw the views that people saw before Mount Davis was constructed and blocked it all out. And you're like, you kind of get it. You understood it a little bit more on why it was put there. And, just beautiful views. It was a beautiful day. The wind's blowing, the flags, the A's flags and the Hall of Fame numbers and retired numbers are all blowing. And I turned to somebody and I said, hey, what time? Or I looked down at my phone, and I believe it was 11:48. We are on the top of the stadium, directly across from the press box, directly across from home plate. And I looked down and it says 11:48. And I all of a sudden got this sick feeling that, you know what? It's not a 12:30 pregame show. It's a noon pregame show. I have now got, and I look down, 11 minutes to get from the top of this side of the stadium to the top of the other side of the stadium. And there's an elevator and a baseball field and another elevator, which can take forever between me and the other side of the stadium. They're not connected. It is the closest I've ever come to missing the start of a pregame show.
Wow.
I immediately, like as I like voice texted Gary Hill, and he's like, "Yeah, no problem, I can get up there," but didn't. Calling out Gary Hill right there because he doesn't panic. He would have, I think he walked in like 2 minutes before it started, but I had to get down from the top through the batting cages, caught the elevator. Thankfully, that one came quickly, and then run all the way around the track to behind home plate, then up back under the stands on the other side. Then I had to wait for an elevator a bit. And I got up there with 3 minutes to spare. Our board op was ready to kill me because he kept, is anybody there? Is anybody, because the
Wow.
rest of the broadcasters were kind of doing the same thing that I was. And I made it. I had nothing in front of me for the entire first segment of that pregame. It was, I like immediately asked, I said, play this cut, I'll talk around it, grabbed a score sheet so I had a lineup and just went. But it was well worth it because it was just fun just to try and get into every corner of that stadium that I'd never been in before.
3 minutes to spare. That's pretty good.
I didn't think it was possible. I thought I was in real trouble, especially with those elevators.
Man, that's still really, really cool. That's a funny story. I love stuff like that because it's just something we would absolutely never know. But
Totally.
good one. I like that.
Go ahead, Olivia. Get some more questions
Oh, I
in. I
have
may have
so
one more for
many. So,
Shannon. Okay. Okay.
what's the most bizarre thing you've ever seen in a game?
Oh boy. Um,
I know like there are animals that go on the field sometimes. That's kind of
No, the
crazy.
squirrel cat was great. Niehaus thought what he thought was a cat and it was a squirrel. So
Oh,
that was pretty fun. And that actually happened in a strange day. It was, if you think back to it, this is the days of, and that was in Kansas City too. This was the days of Tom Wilhelmsen, Sean Kelly, and whatnot. If you were following the team then, you might remember that the bullpen adapted a gladiator mentality and they actually carried a gladiator helmet with them out to the bullpen. And that morning, they had been told by MLB that they could not have that in the bullpen. It was a safety hazard after
hmm.
having it for a couple of weeks. And they were all really mad. And I remember looking out into the bullpen during the game with binoculars, and you could tell that they were still kind of mad and they had a little bit of attitude about it. Some of them like had their feet up and were looking like we're not playing today. If baseball isn't going to let us do this, you could, it was, they were kind of a wild group. And so it was a weird day to start with. And then the next thing you know, something comes running out of the bullpen. And Dave Niehaus is like, "Hey, it's a squirrel. It's a squirrel." And then he was, "Oh no, it's a cat." And he was so disappointed in the way it's a cat. And I'm thinking to myself, did they take a cat out to, are they so mad right now? Did they have anything to do with this cat running out of the bullpen during the game? You know, there have been a number of cats. I thought it was hilarious that Dave thought it was a squirrel and was disappointed it wasn't the squirrel. And that same bullpen group, I still don't know to this day, and nobody will tell me. It has to be one of them. But before games, when they were at home, at times, like in between batting practice and the start of the game, somebody in a gorilla suit would just emerge into the dugout, just kind of come out, look around, and then go back into the clubhouse.
That is not at all what I was expecting for your answer. That's insane.
And nobody will reveal who that was back then. It went on for a few weeks.
Oh my God.
So I would say probably the gorilla was probably
Yeah,
probably the most bizarre thing that I've seen on a baseball
that
field.
makes sense. That fits. On your Wikipedia page, it says that you travel with the team. What is that like? Do they have assigned seats? Are they playing games? Do you get to kind of hang out? What?
Yes, we are seen and not heard and not seen very much. It's their plan. This is the players and the coaches' plan. Broadcasters, as part of the broadcast crew and the flagship radio station, I've been allowed to fly on the plane with them this entire time. Um, it's changed a lot over the years. When I started, everybody dressed up. There were some managers that insisted that the players wear suit and ties, and I would usually be in a skirt or a dress when we traveled then. It has gone from that to no ties to polos and dress slacks to sweatsuits. Not on every trip, but it's a lot more casual now than it used to be. And a lot of that is just that's valuable time that you want those players to be as comfortable as they can, especially when they travel as much as they do. But it was kind of fun when we all dressed up. It was kind of neat to see, my mom dropped me off one day. She's like, "Oh, Jay Buhner really cleans up nicely. Who would have known?" I'm like, yes. And the manners came out too when they did that, which was kind of sweet. But now it never escapes me that it's a pretty heady, pretty kind of privileged thing that I get to do. That I'm walking out on a tarmac. We're not going through an airport. We're getting on a plane, and that is there's always a little bit still of a thrill. Especially when you're getting towards the end of the year, and maybe there has been an important win for the team, and I'm on a plane where the vibe is something really cool could happen. There's an excitement, something that they had been working towards so hard. You sometimes have those moments where you feel that we're not allowed to go up and do interviews or talk to anybody. The media, as they call us, which is basically the TV and radio broadcast crews and production, we sit at the very back of the plane. We used to sit further. We used to fly on one of Paul Allen's planes. He had a couple of 757s that were outfitted for such travel. And at that point, it was the coaches at the front, then the media, and then the players. And that used to be fun because I'd be the last row, and there would usually be a player right behind me, and that player usually they would be friendly and talk, and um, every now and then there might be an extra glass of wine that comes forward. Try this, that kind of thing. That was kind of neat. But the new planes were in the very back. This year, one of the coolest things we saw is the day that they traded for Gino Suarez, and they held the plane for him. And they didn't tell anybody why we were stalled. We heard, but they didn't tell the players. And then the big reception that Gino and his family had when they got on the plane was very, very special. And then Gino went the entire length of the plane. He went and shook everybody's hand, not just his teammates, but he came all the way to the back. He shook everybody's hands, gave hugs to everybody. It was really an incredible moment.
Will he be back next year, you think, or this year?
I don't think so. I think that there is interest if the circumstances are right. And to me, I look at that as they're probably looking at if they could have him for a 1-year contract, that would be something that they would be up for. They don't want to block anyone. You've got Cole Emerson coming. You've got Cole Young, who you are anticipating is going to be your second baseman. I don't, and Gino's going the other way right now, so I don't think they would be interested in anything more than 1 year. And I think there are teams out there that will go to for him.
Go ahead, Olivia.
On that note, what are your thoughts on the winter so far? I mean, how do you see the upcoming season going now that the dominoes have kind of started to fall, especially with Polo gone? I think that's the biggest
Mhm.
thing in my eyes so far. And with the Bryce Miller situation, not that that will affect all that much, but I think
Mhm.
I just saw your tweet that they did not come to an agreement by the deadline.
Yeah. I'm not worried about that. It's unusual for the Mariners to go to arbitration, and I think this probably will because they can negotiate up until the date of the arbitration, but teams typically don't at that point unless there's like an extension that they're trying to work out or something like that. They turn their attention to back to player acquisition. So I would assume that will go to arbitration. Um, I think nobody likes the arbitration process because you go in there and it's basically the team telling you why you're not worth what you think
Right.
you're worth. And that's a tough thing. And this is only the second time that Dakota will have a player in his tenure with the Mariners go to arbitration. So that's not something, it's something they clearly have tried to avoid. In the case of Bryce, um, I'm sure that he and his agent believe that he is worth that. And I think there's probably also a little bit of curiosity for the process. Bryce loves numbers. He is a big numbers guy. And I think he is, I believe he was a finance major. I think he got his degree. And he tends to gravitate towards numbers in whatever he does. It's one of the reasons why he plays so much with his pitches, because of all the data that they get on it. And it's something that he is intrigued by and something that he likes to kind of dabble in. So I think there probably is a part of it with him that this will be an interesting process and he'll understand it. I don't think, I hope not. I would never want there to be hard feelings there, especially with Bryce, but that is something that I think we'll end up seeing, the entire process there. As far as the off season, great that Naylor came back. I was shocked he came back as quickly as he did. And I think that is just shows how much we don't know him yet. And now we're going to get that opportunity to know him. I think it is wonderful that he had the appreciation for what he saw. And, both with the team and the fans and the staff and everything else, to be able to make that commitment is awesome. And I really love what we had seen from him when he went to a couple of hockey games and did a couple of events. And every picture I saw from him on social media, he was thrilled. He was smiling. He had the biggest smile. I was like, I haven't seen that before from him. So cool. So cool to have him on board in that capacity and in that mindset. Jose Ferrer, I think it's going to be a great addition to the bullpen. And I think that he is somebody that's going to continue to develop a little bit as he's here with the Mariners. And I'm interested to see where that goes when the pitching lab gets their hands on him. And then where you're standing right now, it seems like they're a piece short. And I hope that they are able to pick up that last bat that they feel that they need to. I think that to take a look at what's out there, we already talked about Gino, Nico Horner. Now that the Cubs, have a little bit of a surplus, perhaps in the infield, they don't have to trade him. But if they do, I think that is somebody who would be a good fit and that, put up great numbers, put up great WAR, good solid glove. Not a guy that's going to have a lot of pop, but he's a guy that's going to move the line along and get on base. I think that's huge. And I think it's also huge. You could lead him off. I think that is something that the Mariners need to solidify, that leadoff spot. Brendan Donovan, the same thing. I think the key there is, I think having somebody at second base with the experience, when you're putting yourself in the position of we're going after it, we are entering the season, expectations even higher than last year. I think it would be great if you had one more position that you were more sure of and don't have a young player in, and Donovan would fit that. And all that said, you're going to have a young player somewhat. Will it just be second? Will it be second and third? Will Colt Emerson make it? Are you looking at 2? Are you looking at 3? What are you looking at? And I do think that the way that they are built and the way that they have drafted, we're not used to seeing it. We're used to seeing the young pitchers come up and them get their feet under them. I think that we are going to have to get used to seeing, every year there's a young player that's going to be a part of it. And as much as you would love to have, seasoned vets, performing vets at every position, I think Justin Hollander put this pretty well on the Hot Stove Show the other day on our airs. You don't get a Cal Raleigh unless he has that runway to do something and to come up and have the chance to get his feet under him and make mistakes and have the highs and lows. The same thing with J.P. Crawford when he came up. And I think that is something that we're going to have to adjust to a little bit, that early on in the season, there could be 1, there could be 2, there could be 3 young, I don't think it will be, but there conceivably could be 3 young players in the lineup at the same time. And hopefully what you're able to get them in the first couple of months of the season pays off down the road later in the season.
Shannon, can Olivia get a few more questions in? Can I get one in? Is that okay with time, or how you doing?
Let me take a look real quick, make sure I
Okay.
haven't missed anything.
Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Thanks a lot. Let me get a couple more, and I got one more for Shannon.
I just have one more pressing question. This one, well, a lot of these are from my dad too, but this one specifically, just if you can talk about Edgar and how the hitting coaches get together and team up and help the players and how they work with them. Kind of interested in that, and if you have any specific examples of how they're working with players.
Wow. That is one that is a little bit more of a mystery because that's all done down in the hitting cages for the most part. Edgar is kind of the overseer, and then you were looking at the 2 hitting coaches work a little bit more in tandem and um, kind of come up with their philosophy, which is very similar to Edgar's philosophy. Seitzer and Edgar kind of almost of the same era and kind of similar a little bit in who they were of hitters. And so they were very much on the same page, which helps. I think that when you have a hitting team, you've also got Bobby Magallanes, who is also working with the hitters who have different strengths. And so I think that while one might be a little bit more about feel, the other might be a little bit about, let's go look at the video, let's go look at the numbers, let's go look at the charts and whatnot on that. And then Edgar, again, I think, and I've heard this from the players also, can be the confidence person who gives them the confidence. But you see Edgar, he is at home for almost every game. He traveled a lot more last year. But if anybody has early hitting, he is out there and he's giving input on that. And he is in the cages and he is definitely a lot more hands-on right now and a lot more focused on direction and given the platform to kind of lead the direction than he was when he was not a hitting coach, but still coming to the park and helping out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My dad will be excited to hear that. Hi, Dad, by the way. He
Hi,
listens to
Dad.
this.
You got one more, Olivia?
I mean, I do, but you go ahead.
All right. Well, here's the one I have for them. We'll end with Olivia's question. Shannon, so I want to get your comments on Commissioner Rob Manfred. Give us your thoughts about him as commissioner and feel free to maybe compare him to some of the other commissioners that you're familiar with, such as Bud Selig, Fay Vincent, Giamatti, Uberoth, Bowie Kuhn. But anyhow, just give some general thoughts about Rob Manfred and feel free to share any differences with him and some of the other commissioners.
Yeah, it's wow. It's an interesting spot to be in. And you look at, he is the commissioner of baseball, and you think of the entirety of baseball, but he's really just representing one side of it. So for me, it's kind of been eye-opening to really watch and get into more than I would have probably the last three collective bargaining agreements. I was more tuned into than I would have been at other times. I think we've seen tremendous growth in the game in Manfred's tenure. We've seen tremendous change in the game, and we've seen adapting to that change, which I think is important because when I started in this game, it would be outrageous to change anything in this game. And I was dead set against any change for a long time. And then you get the realization that you have to keep evolving to survive. If you want this game here, you've got to do things like pitch clocks, which I was against. And now that it's been here, it really has little impact, I think, on the game itself. You don't see a lot of penalties for it. And it's helped shorten things up. And what have we learned in the last 10 years? Attention spans have gone from this to this, and it's probably needed. Well, I think, why would you want to shorten the trip to the ballpark? But that's where it is. And so I think that I think one of his strengths has been ushering, the game through a rapidly changing environment, like not unlike any other, I think, era. I think you haven't seen a number of changes that you have seen with him. And I think sometimes it's too extreme. I think, the most important thing is to protect the sport. I think the relationship that you have with the other side is very important. And I know it's probably very hard when you labor on one side and ownership on the other. But, it was very contentious, the two before what is coming up right now. And so with a lot on the line, you get a little bit nervous about that. And you hope that they're able to have kind of cooler heads. I think that's an important part, that even though you're representing one, it's the good of the entire game. And so for me, I think there are important things he has done, and I think it will be to be determined in what comes up in this last collective bargaining agreement that he will be commissioner for. And that is going to be probably the biggest piece of part of his legacy. So it's going to be interesting and honestly a little bit scary to watch.
Good points. Really, really quick question. Manfred's asked a lot about expansion. If baseball were to expand to two cities, which two cities would Shannon Drayer pick?
Selfishly Montreal because I want to go there. Although I guess that probably wouldn't happen if they realign. It'd be more east versus west. Um, it sounds like Nashville is something that's been far down the path, so I think that that would be important. I'm madder than heck that they took the A's away, and I'm not. Yeah, I don't know that getting them a new team. I don't think that can be fixed with a new team. So I'm not going to say that. I wish you could move the A's back to Oakland, where I think that they belong, and I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Hawaii. I'd love to see a team in Hawaii. I think that would be a fantastic idea.
Well, yeah,
So I could go there.
so you could go there.
I think that's
Olivia,
a
get
good
one more
call.
in for Shannon, and we'll let her go. She's been so generous with her time. Get one more in, Olivia.
You mentioned earlier watching sports with your dad, and that's just what you do together. Is that kind of where you got your baseball bug?
Yeah, my dad and my mom too. My mom was a tomboy growing up and she loved baseball. And so earliest memories are listening to the games on the radio, like on weekends while being outside. Got to go to games. We lived on the East Coast when I was very little. My first game, I'm not sure what my first game might have. My grandparents lived out here, and I did go to a Mariners game with my grandparents in the first year of the Mariners. I do remember that. But we saw Phillies games. We saw Red Sox. My family were Red Sox fans at the time. Saw Mets games, and then ended up in Illinois, where I kind of stumbled upon the Cubs myself. So yeah, my dad watching sports. He played in college. He coached American Legion ball. So that was firmly established early on.
Well, thank
Shannon, you've been so generous with your time. Thanks for coming back on Sports Untold for the third time.